Laser weapons used to sound like something from science fiction, the kind of thing you would expect to see on a spaceship, not mounted to a truck, a warship, or even a modified passenger jet. But the truth is, militaries have been testing real laser weapons for decades, and some of them are no longer just experiments. They have been used to burn through engines, shoot down drones, intercept rockets, and even target objects in space. Because unlike a missile, a laser does not need to chase its target. It moves at the speed of light, it can be fired again and again as long as it has power, and in some cases, the target may not even realize it is being hit until something starts to burn, blind, fail, or fall out of the sky. Here are the top 10 terrifying laser weapons that actually exist. One of the clearest examples of a real military laser weapon came out of 2015 when Lockheed Martin tested a system called ATHENA. That stands for Advanced Test High Energy Asset, but what it actually did was much easier to understand. It stopped a truck. During the test, ATHENA aimed a high-powered fiber laser at a small truck from more than a mile away. The truck was sitting on a test range with its engine running. Then, without any explosion, loud impact, or visible projectile, the laser burned through the engine manifold and disabled the vehicle. That is what makes this kind of weapon so unsettling. It does not work like a normal weapon. There is no bullet flying through the air, no rocket trail, no dramatic blast, just concentrated energy held on one spot long enough for metal to overheat and fail. The system used a 30 kilowatt laser and combined multiple laser modules into a single powerful beam. Lockheed Martin described it as a step toward laser weapons that could eventually be mounted on aircraft, helicopters, ships, and ground vehicles. In 2014, the US Navy deployed a laser weapon aboard the USS Ponce in the Persian Gulf. It was called LAWS, short for Laser Weapon System. At first, it looked almost underwhelming. It did not resemble a giant cannon or a futuristic superweapon. It looked more like a strange turret mounted on a ship, but what it could do was much more serious. During demonstrations, LAWS was shown disabling small boats and taking out unmanned aerial targets. Instead of firing shells or missiles, it uses a concentrated beam of energy to damage the target. The weapon was especially interesting because it was designed for threats that are becoming more common at sea, like drones, small attack boats, and surveillance systems. The Navy saw this as a major advantage because firing a laser can be far cheaper than launching a missile. A missile can cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. A laser shot, at least in theory, can cost a tiny fraction of that because the main requirement is electrical power. This was not just a military contractor showing off a prototype at a test range. This was a laser weapon deployed on a real US Navy ship in an active region. It was one of the clearest signs that laser weapons were no longer just experimental curiosities. They were being put to sea. The United Kingdom has been developing a laser weapon called DragonFire, and its name sounds almost too dramatic to be real. In January 2024, the UK announced that DragonFire had achieved the country's first high-power firing of a laser weapon against aerial targets during a trial at the Maud Hebrides range in Scotland. What makes DragonFire especially disturbing is its reported precision. The UK government described it as accurate enough to hit something equivalent to a 1-pound coin from a kilometer away. That does not mean it's literally being used to shoot coins, but it gives a sense of how precise the tracking and beam control need to be. DragonFire is designed as a line-of-sight weapon. If it can see the target, it can potentially engage it. With drone warfare becoming one of the biggest threats in modern conflicts, that suddenly makes laser weapons very attractive. It also makes them terrifying, because once these systems become reliable, the sky above a battlefield could be filled with invisible lines of energy silently burning drones out of the air. Israel's Iron Dome is already one of the most famous air defense systems in the world, but Israel has also been developing something very different, a laser defense system called Iron Beam. Iron Beam is designed to intercept short-range threats like rockets, mortars, and drones using a high-powered laser. In 2025, Reuters reported that Israel's defense ministry said Iron Beam had completed successful tests and was expected to become operational later that year. The idea behind Iron Iron Beam is simple but huge. Traditional air defense is expensive. If a cheap drone or rocket is launched, the defending side may have to fire a much more expensive interceptor to stop it. That creates a very dangerous imbalance. Attackers can send low-cost threats while defenders spend massive amounts of money stopping them. A laser system changes that equation. As long as it has enough power, Iron Beam can fire reportedly at incoming threats. It does not run out of missiles in the same way a normal launcher does. It still has limitations, including weather, dust, line of sight, and the time needed to hold the beam on target, but if it works reliably, it could make small aerial threats much less effective. The US Navy's HELIOS system is another major step towards laser weapons becoming normal military equipment. HELIOS stands for High Energy Laser with Integrated Optical Dazzler and Surveillance. In 2022, Lockheed Martin announced that it had delivered a 60-plus kilowatt class laser system to the US Navy. The company described it as the first tactical laser weapon system integrated into existing ships, giving the fleet a directed energy capability as part of a layered defense. This was not just a standalone test device. HELIOS was designed to be integrated with real Navy ships and real combat systems. The system is meant to do multiple things. It can damage or disable targets using high energy laser power. It can function as an optical dazzler, meaning it can interfere with sensors, and it can also be used for surveillance and tracking. HELIOS is not just about burning holes in things. It is also about controlling what the enemy can see. One of the most unsettling developments is not a giant laser on a ship or a secret Cold War machine. It is a laser mounted on an armored vehicle. The US Army has been working on a system called M-SHORAD, which stands for Directed Energy Maneuver Short Range Air Defense. It is a laser weapon mounted on a Stryker combat vehicle designed to help protect troops from drones, rockets, artillery, and mortar threats. The key idea is mobility. A ship-mounted laser protects a ship. A fixed laser protects a base, but a Stryker-mounted laser can move with ground forces. That means soldiers in the field could eventually have a mobile laser defense system traveling with them, watching the sky for drones and other threats. In 2024, Army Times reported that this system was being sent downrange so the Army could learn more about their real-world lethality and reliability. One Army official noted that these systems had been tested in labs for decades, but field use would show what they can really do outside of controlled conditions. Before Iron Beam, there was THEL. THEL stood for Tactical High Energy Laser, and it was a joint US-Israeli project that began in the 1990s. It was also known as Nautilus. Its purpose was ambitious. It was meant to shoot down incoming rockets and artillery threats with a high-energy laser, and it actually worked in tests. In June 2000, the system destroyed an in-flight short-range rocket during a test. Arms Control Association reported that the joint US-Israeli tactical high-energy laser destroyed the rocket at White Sands missile range. That alone was historic. But THEL went further. Reports on the program described it as destroying multiple artillery rockets and shells during test sequences. The problem was not whether the concept could work at all, the problem was practicality. THEL was large, complicated, and based on chemical laser technology. It required hazardous chemicals and a lot of support equipment. Some descriptions compare the prototype's size to several buses. That made it difficult to turn into a practical battlefield system. Even though THEL proved something incredible, the program was eventually discontinued. One of the strangest laser weapons ever built was the Boeing YAL-1. It was a modified Boeing 747 with a massive laser system installed inside. The basic idea was almost unbelievable. The aircraft would fly near enemy territory, detect a ballistic missile shortly after launch, then use a powerful laser to destroy it during its boost phase while the missile was still rising and vulnerable. In February 2010, the YAL-1 airborne laser testbed successfully engaged ballistic missile targets during testing. The Air Force Test Center describes how the aircraft sensors detected the missile, its battle management system gave engagement instructions, and its low-power lasers tracked the target and measured atmospheric conditions so the main beam could compensate for distortion. The fact that this even worked is astonishing, but the program also revealed the harsh reality of laser weapons. The system was huge, expensive, complex, and difficult to use operationally. For it to stop missiles in real war, the aircraft would have to be close enough to enemy launch areas to hit missiles during boost phase. That created obvious problems. A giant modified 747 is not exactly easy to hide or protect near hostile territory. The program was eventually canceled, but the YAL-1 remains one of the most terrifying military laser tests ever conducted. One of the most disturbing laser tests in history happened in 1997. The US Army tested a ground-based laser called MIRACL against an orbiting US satellite. MIRACL stood for Mid-Infrared Advanced Chemical Laser. It was located at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, and the test involved firing the laser at a satellite called MSTI-3. The Arms Control Association reported that on October 17, 1997, the US Army tested MIRACL against an orbiting satellite, raising concerns about anti-satellite weapons and the militarization of space. A laser does not necessarily need to blow a satellite apart to be effective. It can dazzle or damage sensitive optical sensors. It can interfere with imaging systems. It can make a satellite temporarily useless or permanently degraded depending on the power, distance, and target. The 1997 MIRACL test caused debate because it showed how vulnerable satellites might be to directed energy systems. And today that issue is even more important. Modern militaries depend on satellites for navigation, communication, missile warning, surveillance, and targeting. If laser systems can blind or disrupt them, then a war could begin not with explosions on the ground, but with silent attacks on the eyes in the sky. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union became obsessed with directed energy weapons. One of the most mysterious Soviet projects was Terra-3, a laser research complex in what is now Kazakhstan. The program was linked to Soviet research into laser weapons, missile defense, and space tracking. US officials were deeply concerned that the Soviets were developing laser systems that could threaten satellites or ballistic missiles. A declassified US State Department historical document from the late 1970s stated that the US believed the Soviets had several prototype projects underway to assess laser weapons, including possible anti-satellite roles. Terra-3 became surrounded by rumors, fear, and Cold War uncertainty. One of the most famous claims is that a Soviet laser sight tracked or illuminated the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1984. The details remain debated, and some versions of the story are likely exaggerated, but what is not fake is the larger point. Both superpowers were seriously investigating whether lasers could be used against satellites, missiles, and aircraft. The National Security Archive has also published Soviet-era material referencing laser direction facilities at the range, including Terra-3K as an experimental laser weapons guidance system mock-up for model space defense. Today's systems are smaller, cleaner, more practical, and more openly discussed, but decades ago, behind closed doors, governments were already asking the same terrifying question: could a beam of light become a weapon? The answer, after all these years, is yes. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozolowski, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.